Talk a little bit about from Jacob to David. So we welcome your phone calls, and we hope you call a friend to tune in tonight to discuss from Jacob to David. We have with us tonight David ben Israel, Samir bat Israel, and Gideon ben Israel. Welcome. From Jacob to David, first of all, tell us a little bit about Jacob, because Jacob was, if I'm not mistaken, the beginning of the whole house of Israel, or the house of Israel. So tell us a little bit about Jacob and his descendants.
Sure. I mean, I think the other shows that we've had thus far have outlined the relationship between Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that lineage. And what we find is that Jacob, he was a very powerful man who had received the blessing from his brother Esau, who did not want the blessing of the older child. And once he got that blessing, he went on to many great exploits. And one of the great exploits that we learn in the story is that he actually wrestled with an angel. And after having wrestled with the angel, he was able to subdue the angel. And the angel at that time said, "No more shall your name be Jacob, but shall be Israel." And that was the first time that we see the name Israel used in the Holy Scriptures. So as we follow the story, we find that Israel gave birth to many sons, 12 in fact, and those are the 12 tribes of the children of Israel.
So as we see on the screen, we just had up on the screen here, dealing with some of the house of Israel, the house of Jacob, as you said. We see that Jacob had 12 sons. It appears he had one daughter as well. But of those 12 sons, we know that as the program before, the sisters did a program dealing with the holy seed that came down through there. But as you well know, with more than one child, there's going to be sibling rivalries. And there were sibling rivalries among the children of Israel.
Yeah, there were. In particular, Joseph, who was the eldest son of the beloved wife Rachel. We find that there was a certain love that Jacob had for Joseph, and he gave him what is described as a coat of many colors. And when he gave him this coat, it really vexed his brothers and really made them very jealous. And what they did was they put a plot together where they were going to do something, bring some harm upon him, and eventually the first thing they said is they were going to put him in a ditch and leave him there to die. And eventually they decided instead to go ahead and bring him out of the ditch and sold him to Midianites, who took him into the land of Egypt as a captive.
You know, speaking of Egypt, we know that Egypt was visited for with many plagues as a result of the children of Israel being there. But what was interesting, here recently there was a movie that came out called The Prince of Egypt. And it portrayed Moses as being the Prince of Egypt, but we know Moses wrote the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, and even in that he said that Joseph was one of the second highest rulers in the land of Egypt. But in the movie it portrayed Moses as being the Prince of Egypt. Tell us a little bit about that.
That was a cartoon that came out, and it really portrayed Moses as being the prince because he was the one that was sent to lead our people out of Egypt. But as you stated earlier, it really was Joseph that was the prince in Egypt. He was second in command of Pharaoh, and he was the one that had the power and that ruled with Pharaoh, and it wasn't Moses at that time.
Well, you know, even so, his brothers being jealous of him, they had to visit him once again in his new power seat. But like with all leaders, you got leaders that come and go. And once leaders are, when they're there, they're the leader, but they begin to fade with time, and thus people have a tendency to forget the impact that certain leaders have on the community at large. Likewise, that's what happened during Moses' time, when Joseph's legacy had faded. The Pharaoh said, "Hey, these folks may get a little bigger and wiser than, or they may, grow mightier than us, and we need to deal wisely with them."
Well, my brother, it's certainly evident that his legacy did not end as they thought it would. The prophecies had been very sure that the children of Israel would sojourn in a land that was not their own. but yet they would surmount those, what some would have called insurmountable odds. Also, if I may briefly allude to the importance of Joseph's story and the relationship between him and heavenly things denote the importance of who we are as a race of people and our connection with spiritual things. If I may read just in Genesis 36, let's see here, Genesis 36, well actually it's in 37, and it's verse 5, it says, "And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it his brothers, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, I pray you this dream which I have dreamed, for behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf rose above, and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made obedience to my sheaves."
So they bowed down.
Yes, sir. And his brethren said unto him, "Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us?" And they hated him yet the more with this dream and of his words. And this last verse here really helps to point to the Israelite spiritual connection in heavenly places.
Even
Verse
at that
9.
time, right.
Absolutely. Even unto this day. Verse 9. "And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it his brothers, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obedience to me." Now, it was 11 stars, but we know it to be 12, but he happened to be that 12th star.
Sure.
Now, one other reference.
So in that instance, his mama, daddy, and everybody bowed down to him.
Exactly. Now, what we in our lives call uppityness or things of that nature, in God's eyes could be his predesignation for rulership.
Amen.
So we have to, but that'll be manifested in time. But in Revelations chapter 12, briefly, it simply said this, where are we? Okay. Let's see, Revelation, okay, here we go, I'm sorry, verse 1. "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered." That's our people. So what we find then, the parallels between what happened in Genesis, when Joseph dreamed a dream, and it encompassed the entire creation, or the most central points that we reference in our creation. And in Revelation, which we consider end-time prophecy, we see the same thing. It pointed to this one race of people, the children of Israel.
But you know, it's interesting. His brothers despised him because he was a dreamer. But where there's no vision, the people perish.
Absolutely. Well, God's predestination is going to stand no matter what.
Right.
So when God has predesignated one to perform a certain deed, then whether the people around you despise you or not, it doesn't matter, because they will prevail.
But the important thing to understand is that these dreams came from God. I mean, it wasn't just him dreaming. It was dreams that were sent specifically to him. As a matter of fact, as you follow that story, once Joseph gets into Egypt, it is those dreams that take him out of the captivity of a dungeon, a jailhouse, and bring him, once he is able to decipher a dream that Pharaoh had that nobody else in the land could decipher, that dream propelled him to the second highest seat in the land of Egypt. Once it came true.
Right.
Okay, so there's a dream that is given by the Most High, and then once it comes to fruition, then you see that the Most High must have had his hands in it, and of course Pharaoh could not deny that. Now, the Pharaoh at that time couldn't deny it, but as we continue to the story, we know that Pharaohs, as you said, will come later on, that have to be taught exactly who is in control.
Because, you know, many times, even throughout the story, there are people reminiscing, or not necessarily reminiscing, but recounting the plight of the children of Israel. Say, look, these folks have been, they bring destruction to kings. And it's not them, though. It's the Most High that's
It's the
really
Most High.
bringing about that
Power.
destruction.
Absolutely.
Just like during the time when Moses was raised up, because the Pharaohs had forgot about Joseph.
Right.
Then they said, well, let's kill off all these firstborn males, and we'll see.
All the males.
Right. All the males.
Right.
Right. All of the males. Let's kill off all the males, but one they didn't get to, and that was Moshe. Tell us a little bit about Moshe.
Well, he was the one that was called to bring our people out of bondage. I mean, just like you had said before, Pharaoh had said, these people are growing and let's deal wisely with them. They're becoming more than we are. Unless they come up against us, let us deal wisely with them. So like you said, they started to kill off all the males of Israel, but then Yahweh reserved always one who would be that savior that would bring his people out, and that was Moshe at that time. And then speaking about that sojourning, in the 400 and 430 years, and how people get that confused, thinking that, okay, when we were in Egypt, we were there for 430 years, so that was the captivity that Abraham had spoke of prior to that. But actually, it wasn't until the time that Moses was born that our people began to be in captivity then. So there was a big difference. So we weren't really in bondage there, but to the last 80 to 100 years.
Right.
So that's when the affliction actually began.
That's right.
Because it
That's
said that we would be afflicted 400 years.
Right.
So that, but we know when we hit the shores of America, the affliction.
Began immediately.
It was
Began immediately.
But one thing in bringing about Yahweh's power, bringing about His plan to bring into subjection Pharaoh, Yahweh visited Egypt with many plagues,
Well, he-
embarrassed the Egyptian gods.
That's exactly what he did. All their power was associated with not only their military might, their architectural prowess, and their ability to amass the greatest civilization the world has seen
Right.
since the children of Israel, but only in the natural sense. But the gods that they built all this upon was the way Yahweh showed them and the world that their gods were meant for naught. Because each one of them, when the plagues came, it was directed at their gods. And as the children of Israel also began to marvel at this, it was each plague was a reassuring point that God had sovereign reign. He had anointed a leader, which Moshe was, and the power that he displayed helped to underscore his ability and authority that Yahweh had given him.
But why are we so caught up nowadays with Egypt? I mean, everybody want to be an Egyptologist. I mean, we read in Scripture where it says Egypt was made a base kingdom. And we read also whereby all of the things that Yahweh brought upon Egypt to bring Egypt to that, from that lofty position, was all about destroying the gods of Egypt. And now we see this turn of events. Everybody want to, catch up once again with the gods of Egypt.
Well, that's what the Europeans have fed us, is Egyptology, Africanism. They have fed us that that's who we are. So as a result of the people who listen to mass media, don't use the biblical story as the source of their life, and then have the spiritual blockage to not be able to understand what's there, just to have the word Israel be in the Bible more than any other word alone isn't enough for them to associate that with the God that the book speaks of. So there's only going to be a small remnant that will be able to, because of Yahweh's choosing, that will be called.
You said spiritual blockage, and that's really a good segue to the next question, because with that blockage there, people don't see who's really doing anything, who's behind the scene, the invisible hand, if you will. Well, Israel was behind the veil, or I don't want to say behind the veil, but there was a spiritual blockage, if you will. Okay, you follow me. There was a spiritual blockage, but Yahweh began to move that block, or that blockage, and the only way He could do that was bring the people to clean them up first.
True. Right.
Bringing them out of Egypt first.
Out of Egypt, to bring them to Himself, and He had to do that with the washing.
That great baptism when they went through the Jordan and bringing them across the land. And it's the same thing that happened again when Joshua led our people from the wilderness over into the land. And he was just making a people into Himself and purifying a people as He always does, and washing away and purging out the rebels.
So that was a baptism.
That was a baptism.
Yeah, and He was preparing them. I mean, there was a great task that was about to be given to the children of Israel. And it says in the scriptures that Yahweh married these people in the wilderness. And so, before a wedding, you got to prepare the bride. You got to get her mindset. You got to prepare the feast. You got to prepare the participants. And there's a lot of things that were taking place because a wedding is something that cannot be taken lightly and must be done decently and in order.
Nowadays, it won't be.
Well,
I mean, because people got all that train of dresses and all that. No,
no doubt. But as once he was able to take the children of Israel out of their captivity and get them away from, it's like where we are today. We're in captivity in America, and because we are bombarded with television and radio and all the things that kind of keep our mind filled, for the most part, we don't know Yah. We don't know his ways. And he had to impart his ways out in the quiet, where he was in control, where nobody could go anywhere. He had them right where he wanted them, and he brought them out there. He put fire in the front to lead them and smoke in the back, or I think I might have said that backwards. But anyway.
Pillar cloud.
Right, and it encamped, the camp kept them, their bounds known, kept them isolated, and a trip that should have taken a matter of days to months, going from Egypt to Israel
12 days
on
journey.
foot, ended up taking them 40 years. But that process was a purging process.
Right.
Well, when you say them, you really have to kind of connect, because that was us, our fathers, our progeny.
Sure.
We our ancestors.
Our forefathers.
And we certainly are partial to their era because we are part of their era, which is why we're in captivity. We're the results of their not believing that Yahweh's word was true and his prophetic pronouncements concerning his people were correct. They were ending up being kicked out of the land, established their own idolatry among the nations, and when they had the Holy Father to themselves, they ended up having to be thrust into the nations to show them how to get back to one who had been there for them first.
But once you take someone out of the mire, clean them up, you got to give them some instructions. What was the instructions that was given Israel?
That was the law that Moshe gave at Mount Sinai, which are the 10 Commandments that people take lightly, not understanding that those are the vows that Yahweh made with our people, and those are what we vow that we would do in walking in with him, his commandments. All 10 of them, which make up 613 laws that Moshe imparted to our people.
Right.
And Yahweh commanded that we obey his laws.
So that isolation was in the wilderness.
Right.
Well, the isolation today, however, has to be here and here, isolating ourselves from the intrusion of the world and their philosophies, their traditions, their religious ideologies, and having to focus on our Creator. And that's the difficult thing. As we see these patriarchs and we come up through Egypt, the plagues, the establishing of the first king of Israel, there's very many similarities to the trials and tribulations that they experience then and what we as individuals must go through. But the key point is their understanding of their identity, attaching themselves to a creative source that gave them not only their identity, their culture, their way of life, their language. And these are the essences of identity. And that's what we're trying to say. Our whole history is wrapped up in the biblical story. These people are our ancestors.
Right.
And we have the same right to the kingdom of heaven. And when I say the kingdom of heaven, I'm talking about Yahweh's kingdom that's going to come down out of heaven on the earth. But it is a heavenly kingdom that our forefathers that are in the Bible had.
You talk about the culture that was imparted to them. And this is something that we can't I don't want to get by too quickly, because that was the Most High's culture that he gave to our people, with the idea that the whole world was eventually going to get this culture, but it had to be given to somebody to bring to the world. When we got that culture, that was the first time that Yahweh ever dealt with our people with any people, I should say, exactly.
Right.
And he had to teach his ways.
Right.
And that's the key, because you talked about what took place then and how it pertains to now. I mean, our people nowadays believe that there is no law.
Right.
They'll say in one breath, do you know the Lord? And then in another breath, you don't have to keep the law. But you can't know the Lord without knowing the law.
Right.
I mean, the things that we talk about in the 10 Commandments, you shall have no other gods before me. You shall have no graven images.
Right.
Hallow Yahweh's name. Yahweh's name.
Right.
Okay. Because most people don't even know his name. Remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. We get in, whenever we have shows on the Sabbath, we have people who argue whether the Sabbath is one day or another day, but it says remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. It's not something that can move around. It can be argued about. The Sabbath, Yahweh's Sabbath, is one day that we are supposed to keep.
What day is that?
That's Saturday, the day we call Saturday today.
The seventh day of the week.
The seventh day of the week. Thank you. And the rest of the commandments, very quickly: honor your mother and your father, something that is lacking desperately in the world today. Do not kill.
There was a shooting today in Oklahoma.
Right.
Isn't that
Teenager.
something?
They didn't. Good thing they didn't kill anybody, but
Right.
it was a
Wonder
shooting.
what they
Another
Wonder what they
shooting.
have,
Yet
what
another
the
shooting.
IQ was.
Well,
Middle
Right.
school children too.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I said that because they sometimes you think that just because you make A's and B's, that automatically makes you a good person, quote unquote.
well,
Go
if you
ahead.
know these commandments, you don't have to have a high IQ.
Right.
you know,
Those
that-
commandments are a high IQ.
Well, there you go. There you go.
That was the thing that put the difference between children of Israel
That's the
and
point I was going to make when I
Right.
got through,
Right.
because
Go ahead.
these are the things. Okay, let me just finish very quickly. Do not commit adultery.
Right.
Do not steal.
Right.
Do not lie.
Right.
And do not covet. Do not lust after what somebody else has. And truly, by giving us His ways, and by giving us the culture that we were supposed to live under, it became a separation between us and the other nations to whom He had given pagan gods.
Giving them up to-
He had given them up to their own lusts and their
Right.
own desires.
But you know what?
Right.
Just like at a wedding, what did the bride say? I do.
Right.
All that Yahweh have said, we will do and be obedient. Let's get ready to go to the Around the World Report. We'll be right back after these.
Hi, I'm Ruth Israel with the Around the World Report and the Community Update. Georgia's welfare reform, where do we go from here? In less than 13 months from now, welfare would end for several thousand Georgians and their children. New reform laws have put a 48-month cap on welfare benefits, and most recipients will be thrown into a crisis unless the deadline is extended or new programs such as job training and educational efforts are available. Whatever happens, we must not do anything that simply freezes people in a hopeless situation. Deuteronomy 15:11 reads, "For the poor shall never cease out of the land. Therefore I command you, saying, you shall open your hand wide unto your brother, and to your poor, and to your needy in a land." I wonder what the big multi-million-dollar churches would do about that. Probably nothing. And moving to our Health Watch, scientists map a chromosome pair in a medical milestone discovery. More than 200 scientists around the world discovered what they call the first chapter of the Book of Genes, a book that is said to have the human genetic code. The scientists expect to have by chromosomes include at least 545 genes, many of which play an important role in early fetal development and an array of human illnesses, from cancer to mental retardation. Could this mean they are trying to recreate creation? You know, genes, Genesis. Now here's Meskia with the Around the World Report.
Thanks, Ruth. On the nation's home front, approval of a Dollar Tree in Washington, D.C. Martin Luther King Jr. has been approved to be given honor by a monument. The monument will be placed between the Lincoln and Jefferson Memorial. John Lewis was reported as saying, he has always supported the idea but he never dreamed that King would be so honored with a monument on the Mall in Washington. Thus says the Lord, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images. Coming up now, in the Around the World report, the false prophet. The false prophet urges Italy to give blood. The community, oh man, this past first day, an appeal for blood donations on behalf of the cause was made by Pope John II, saying in Rome, the supply is lacking and will become still more worrying with the influx of pilgrims during the whole. Nowhere is it written, thus saith the Lord, you shall give blood to the Red Cross in times of need. But what is written in Leviticus 17 chapter verse 11, for the life of the flesh is in the blood. You decide. Christianity's 2000 Holy Year is to kick off on one of the biggest pagan winter festival days of this year, Christmas Eve. Supposedly the day set for the Pope to open a sealed door within St. Peter's Basilica. The Pope was also reported as speaking spiritually, saying, there is work to be done, as well as repentance, so that Christians would have their hearts and minds in order, set in order for the coming Holy Year. The Christian peoples of the world might find it very hard to repent when having no knowledge of what law is, especially if one has been told the law was nailed to the cross. Now to Community Update.
Thanks, Mansky. Finally tonight, the euro slips to parity with the U.S. dollar. In an upset to European pride, the euro fell to parity with the dollar for the first, with continuing embarrassment for the common European currency that is launched with great expectation on January the 1st. The euro was quoted on some trading systems at 99.5 cents, traded briefly for $1 before recovering 9 cents in the New York trading. Let's continue to watch as the New World Order takes its rightful place right here in the good old USA. This has been the Around the World Report in the Community. Back to our regular programming.
Hi, welcome back to Sounds of the Times. Our telephone number here is 770-559-2999. That's 770-559-2999. We're talking about the millenniums, and tonight we're talking about from Jacob to David. And we welcome your phone call, 770-559-2999. Samara, David had talked a little bit about the law. You want to share it with us?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, in picking up where he left off, in that Yahweh was just making a difference between Israel and the rest of the nations and giving us this law. And he told us in Deuteronomy, he says, keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations. And who shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. And also, when we were talking about Egypt and the fact that our people were in bondage there, and that, you know, Yahweh is the same today, tomorrow, and forevermore, and that he brought those people back into, again, meaning bondage, when we were here in America. And the same way that he brought us out of Egypt into the wilderness before is the same thing that he is going to do again when he brings us out of this Egypt. And he told us in Ezekiel when he said, the peoples, and will gather you out of the countries in which you are scattered, with a mighty hand and with an outstretched arm and with fury poured out. And I will bring you into the peoples, and there will I plead with you. Yahweh is the same. I mean, the same thing that he did before is the same thing that he is going to do.
Yahweh raising us up for this great that we had toward the nation. Teach the nations how to live in righteousness. But as Sister just alluded to, Yahweh said he's going to bring us out into the wilderness once again to get our mind, well, I'm really the king. Well, that being the case, why did our father say at one time, before, give us a king. What was that all about?
Well, you have to understand, the children of Israel are flesh and blood, even though our habitation is in holiness and in heavenly habitation. Our people have been, I guess you can say, relegated to a fleshly perspective. And if you look at it from a fleshly perspective, then what they wanted was what the other nations around them had, and that was a figurehead, a leader, and one that would be a champion.
They couldn't see beyond the altar?
Okay, yes. And what happened was, as they began, what Yahweh, when the prophet went to Yahweh, you know, they want a king. He said, it's not you that they have rejected. Even as it is this day, it's me that they have rejected. So what he did, he said, okay, I'm going to give you a king, but he's going to make service good. You're going to have to pay him tribute. He's going to wax fat. You're going to be waxing little. What he did was gave king. The first king was a shoulder higher than any other of the men of Israel. He was goodly to look to, and he was vain, just as these gladiators, these leaders. Not to forget one of our couple of our champions, Wilt the Stilt, who passed, you know, condolences, and Sweetness, Walter Payton, great and mighty men who won't hear the word.
They did.
Because they're caught up in, you know, you got somebody 6'9", 6'10". What can you tell? 6'9", I'm 6'10". So these great men were vain in his own ability, end up getting himself cut off by doing something that is not permitted, and that is he made a sacrifice to Yahweh, but had not been given permission, which really underscores and illustrates and highlights how important are instructions and do what God has told you.
Plus, he was not of the priesthood.
Not of the priesthood.
Right.
Go ahead.
That's a good point. No, I mean, I was just going to comment to that, because obviously the Levites had been established as the priests of the nation of Israel. They were set aside for the purpose of ministering and dealing with the sanctuary, dealing with the holy things of Yahweh. And sacrifices are something. I mean, the brother mentioned when Saul did those sacrifices, the problem is he didn't really understand the importance of those sacrifices. You have laws, and you have statutes, and you have judgments. So when you break a law, when you commit a sin by breaking a law, there are statutes involved with that, and then judgments. Those animal sacrifices were judgments. That means that they were showing that they knew that they had committed a sin, and that they were losing something to cover that sin.
Cost them something, right?
It was going to cost them something, right? And because they didn't really take good care of the things that Yahweh had given, his things, they didn't take good care of his holy days, which he had established with them. And today, you ask the average person, what is a holy day? They'll probably tell you what a holiday is. I mean, they're preparing for one of their big holidays, Christmas, without realizing that there were 7 holy days that were established by Yahweh. Most people don't even know what those holy days are. We had the Passover, which was the covering of our people just before we came out of Egypt, and those children were all killed off, the firstborn. We have the unleavened bread. We have first fruits. We have the Pentecost, Day of Atonement, the Feast and the Feast of Trumpets. And all of these feasts are tantamount and extremely important to all of the deliverance of the people who are in the captivity today. And without knowing the importance of holy days and keeping these holy days, you have no idea what you're doing in the world today.
Well, that's a good point, because you ran those off as if, you know, I'm sure you had been enlightened to what these days were all about, but the way you just kind of rattled those things off as if, you know, it was just so easy for you because you practiced that.
Yeah, it's
because most people can't just, you know, rattle off those holy days.
But it's not difficult to practice Yah's ways. It's a choice. And it goes back to what the brother said about being humble and submissive and wanting to do the things that Yah has established that most people don't want to do. They make a conscious effort not to do, and they refuse to let their children do it. And for that reason, we see that we have extremes of families where children are shooting up schools, you know, yet and still parents children, we've got all of these imbalances within the society.
Right. Well, you know, Gideon talking about this king that everybody wanted. Everybody could see he looked like a great man, shoulder length, but Yahweh had another plan. And what was indicative king that Yahweh was raising up was that the statement he made when he saw that his family, the children of Israel, were being terrorized by Goliath. And his brothers didn't want him to come up there to deal with him, but he said, is there not a cause?
Is there not a cause? And who's going to face circumcised dog?
770-559-2999. Join us. 770-559-2999. Uncircumcised dog.
Yes, sir. Well,
and I think that's a spirit that's roaming in the earth today, because folks walk up to you, what's up, dog?
What's up, dog?
you understand that, and I want that's kind of a pattern. I'm old enough to remember when in the 50s they were calling people rats. You know, you rat thing, you dirty rat. Then they went from being a rat to a cat. In the 70s, 60s, late 60s, early 70s, you were a cool cat. Cat.
George Clinton.
Right, Clinton.
Dog.
Clinton brought it, dog.
Right.
Now we dog. You know, and then the children of Israel amongst us, we the egos. No, lion. So, I mean, so there's still symbolism, imagery, and there are elements of various aspects of nature that we embody in our culture, and it's really an underpinning of not having an identity, and yet the identity that we assimilate to normally is one that is going to ultimately destroy.
But you know, David had, you know, tremendous respect for Yahweh's anointing. In lieu of the fact that he had some other things happen in his life, and chased around by the first and by his son and all that kind of thing, he still said, you know, I can't believe you had the audacity to lay your hand to the Yahweh's, you know, in not that the death of Saul.
He would be the king, and he had told this through Samuel, and when he was taking away this kingdom from Saul, and he said, but now your kingdom shall not continue. Yahweh has sought him a man after his own heart, and Yahweh has commanded him to be captain over his people. Have not kept that which Yahweh had commanded, because Yahweh doesn't look at your stature. You know, Yahweh looks out after your heart.
And that's what even the prophet and the priest Samuel looked at and said, well, this must be him.
Right.
Boy, somewhere around here.
And here comes little David. You know, it couldn't be him.
Well, you know, but it's not about numbers. It's not about size. It's not about strength. That's why it's difficult for a lot of men of power and height. And, you know, martial artists, all these people talking about the word of God being humble, difficult. And we see the illustrations in the sports arena where these athletes are just be above themselves because of the salaries that they make and what the society has done. So humility is really one of the most important things we have as a race of people and as children of God.
Hello?
Do we have a call? Call to go 770-559-2999. That's 770-559-2999. We're talking a little bit about from Jacob to David. Go ahead.
Oh, yes, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Can you explain Job, its first chapter and the 6th verse? A friend of mine told me Satan is still allowed to go up to heaven.
Okay, thank you for your call. And call us, when you call, turn your television to the telephone. We're at 770-559-2999.
Let me just say briefly, that brother was absolutely correct. Satan is one of the sons, of Yahweh. And even though he's a fallen angel, when commanded time, there are 3 times in a year, all appear before Yahweh. And the Feast of Pentecost, Feast of Trumpets, and unleavened bread, exactly. And during those times, Satan must appear because he's not operating outside the will and authority of Yahweh. Yahweh creates good and evil.
Right.
That's why when we see situations like when she told Jacob to lie, in a sense, him being his brother, that unrighteousness in some people's eyes turned out to be righteousness for a nation of people, because Yahweh controlled all those things. Moses having been a but yet that was surmounted by Yahweh's appointment. So these are just various points. Yes, Satan does have to appear in him.
But on point though, Satan keeps Yahweh. Our people won't. But Satan keeps Yahweh.
The scripture says Satan, he fear.
That's right.
That's right.
Satan tremble. Yes, sir.
Satan fear and trip. Let's go back to the phones. Call, go ahead, state your name, please.
Yeah, 'cause I have a question. Okay, I was trying to explain to my mother that Christmas is this holiday, and it's a paganistic holiday, and she doesn't understand the seriousness of her not
Okay.
being Christian. And she says, well, Jesus is the reason for sin, to do with his birth, nothing to do with his
That's easy. It's marketable.
They making $1 billion.
So she told me that everyone has their own opinion, and what she chooses to celebrate it for has nothing to do with what I was trying to
Sure.
say. And I was trying to tell her, if she's upholding that day and not upholding the right days, then she's still being a pagan.
Thank you. Thank you for your call. In this matrix of Satan. So,
Well, what people need to realize is that Christmas is something that was being celebrated long before the Messiah.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a pagan ritual that came from the Gentiles, and it's something with
Saturnalia.
right, and honoring the sun. And Yahweh spoke about this. People probably don't realize that Christmas was in the prophets long before we started really acknowledging Christmas. And Yahweh had told our people, thus says Yahweh, learn
Where are
not
you
the
reading
way.
that? Tell
I'm
us where
reading
you
from
read.
Jeremiah. I'm
Jeremiah
sorry.
chapter 10?
Jeremiah chapter 10.
Okay.
And it says, thus says Yahweh, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven. Heathen are dismayed at them. For the custom of the people are cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of a workman with an axe. They cover and with gold, they fasten it with nails, with hammers, that it move not. I mean, modern day Christmas tree. And people do this thinking that this is the birth of Christ, but we all know that Christ was not born in the winter months. He was born in the summer months. And that this is something that we've been celebrating, worshiping the sun and all the hosts of heavens, which Yahweh divided unto them, but for Israel it was not so.
well, you know, speaking of the birth of the Messiah, and as it relates to King David, that he proceed out of his own bowels, that would his kingdom would be established forever. Was that Solomon?
Oh no, Solomon and he made some heavy imprints on the history or the road of time. But the Messiah, Yahshua, that branch, as the Old Testament scriptures refer to him, the arm of righteousness. He brought righteousness, and that salvation was his son. And since when I talked earlier about this people having a spiritual connection, and that connection had to do with Joseph dreaming of dreams, the sun, the moon, the 11 stars doing obedience to him, and then we find Yahshua, when he was born of an immaculate. That was without the man-woman exchange. That holiness, and people would say, well, that angel was involved with Mary. Yeah, he overpowered her, and then that thing that was conceived in her was the Son of God. But it was the seed of David.
Absolutely.
So the spiritual connection between this flesh and blood people, as we are, and holy, high, heavenly holy places is very real and is illustrated very eloquently throughout the scripture.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, let's go back to the phones. Caller, go ahead and state your name. We're at 770-559-2999. Go ahead, caller.
My brothers and my sister,
Yes, sir.
we're talking about David earlier. I just want to make a comment on David's spiritual resume.
Yes, sir. We can hear him. We can hear him. Go ahead, sir. Well,
Spiritual resume, we don't understand that God is and, you know, as he came to confront on another journey to bring food, he resume. That's what we don't do today. I smoked the lion, I killed the bear, this Philistine, he's nothing. And men don't be bold and brave enough to denounce that armor that they try to put on us, because we are bold in our resume. And if you can encourage the brothers to walk in this spiritual resume, I'd like to hear that for the brothers out there, because David was a strong man, standing firm in the countenance that God blessed him with.
All right. Appreciate your call. Sorry we couldn't hear much. You all callers, please turn down your television, speak directly to the phone, and the volume here.
I heard some of it, and hopefully I won't speak too far away from his point, but David's strength came from Yahweh. And it was the fact that David loved Yahweh and loved Yahweh's people that gave him his strength. Psalms were written by David. The thing that David wanted to do more than anything else was Yahweh a home, a house. And that was something that Yahweh said, me a house? I mean, just for David to have even and that was spoken specifically of in the scriptures. And I just want the earlier caller who was asking about Jesus, the reason for the season, an important point is that the name Yahshua, who, and not Jesus, Yahshua means understand the importance of Yahweh and why Yahshua. Then you start to understand why it's important that he came, not that he was born, as some people would celebrate his birth. I mean, which doesn't make any sense. What's important is that he came, and he came for a purpose. And just to follow up the scripture that was read in Jeremiah 33:14, it says, "Behold, saith Yahweh, that I will perform that good thing which I have promised unto the house of Israel and to the house of Judah. In those days and at that time will I cause the branches to grow up into David, and he shall execute judgment and righteousness in the land. In those days shall Judah be saved, and Jerusalem shall dwell safely. And this is the name, she shall be called Yahweh, our righteousness. For thus saith Yahweh, David shall never want a man to sit in the house of Israel." So it was about establishing the covenants and the promises that Yahweh had made to our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and David, seed in line, so that we know that Yahshua was important to be celebrated for what he did for our people.
You know, speaking of David, Yahweh said that the kingdom would be a divided kingdom.
Absolutely.
And that kingdom will be a divided kingdom, and it will not be, that statement will not be disannulled unless the covenant of day and night can be disannulled. Let's go back to the phones. Caller, go ahead and state your name.
Yeah, my name is Stephen.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm calling from out here in Lithonia, Georgia.
Yes, sir.
What I'd like to know, basically, right, since I was basically brought up in this Christian religion, and for a couple of years I had some friends that are Muslim, which I believe you guys are, Sunni Muslims?
No, sir.
What are you?
Hebrews.
Hebrews, okay.
Hebrew Israelites.
Okay. What I mentioned the same issue as Christmas being some kind of ritual, place a head on top the
Okay.
I forgot, I believe it was the praise Nimrod or some kind of
He's talking about the original piece in the tree.
Oh, well, you know, one thing we spoke to earlier was the issue involving the tree. We read in Jeremiah chapter 10, verses 1 through 5, relating to the Christmas tree. So feel free to give us a call at 404-286-5869. That's 404-286-5869. Also, we have classes held at the congregation at NCCI 3901A Covington Highway, Decatur, Georgia 30032. And also we have a website located at www.thencci.com. Caller, go ahead, please.
yeah, hello, my name.
Sure.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was basically just, I was watching the show and I heard you say that they was talking about when they chose king, when they asked for a king.
Yes, sir.
That God said they had rejected him, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that God, I was reading in Matthew 23 and it was like, "O Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them which are sinners, thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathered her chicken under her wings." So that God that they were referring to, who they rejected, which was their king at that time, wasn't that God Jesus Christ?
I'm afraid not, my brother.
So Jesus wasn't the God of the Old Testament?
If you recall, in 4 BC is when the Messiah was born.
Okay,
Was
right.
brought was word was made flesh 4 BC.
Right, you're talking about Emmanuel, which means God is with us, right?
Well, we're talking about Yahshua. Yahweh's self manifested in the earth in 4 BC. So in the Old Testament, there was no manifestation of the Messiah in the flesh until 4 BC. So what you're referring to is something that happened thousands of
He's alive when before Abraham was. I am. He said Abraham was glad to see my day. He saw it and was glad. Was I am.
Keep in mind, as I said earlier, before the Word was made flesh. So the Word has always been, even from the very beginning, was before him, Yahshua was, because Yahweh has always provided salvation for the children of Israel. Thank you for your call.
Said, let us make man.
Let us make man.
Right.
I was just going to say, I think that's one of the things that people confuse because they don't know that Yahshua is truly the son of David.
Right.
I mean, he was physically the son of David in the flesh because Yahweh had promised David that it would be out of your bowels would be the seed that would have this everlasting throne. And that was the Messiah. He is the offspring of David.
As well as son of the highest.
Right. He became that son of the Most High when that spirit was made flesh. But he was flesh, the seed, the son. And I think that's the confusion because people don't understand that spirit, that word was always
From the beginning.
from the beginning. But he was made, he lighted upon Yahshua, that son of David.
Well, you know, like with men, David was a great man indeed, but David also had issues that, like we all have issues, but David had issues that caused him that put him in jeopardy and that opened the door, that gave great occasion to Yahweh's enemies to blaspheme the Most High.
Right.
But even in light of those things, David, the kingdom that will be established during the millennium would be a divided kingdom.
Well, when you say put him in jeopardy, understand this, Yahweh has predesignated each of us to salvation or destruction. And even though David did what was expected him to do as a flesh man, he also did spiritually what was expected of him to do. So because of his position, he was given certain liberties. Those liberties that had given him for rulership and power was not to be taken away from him.
Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and close out the program. We also welcome you at the congregation, 3901 8th Covington Highway. That's Decatur, Georgia, 30032. Telephone number, someone's manning the phone as we speak at 404-286-5869. And also, there's a website located at www.ncci.com. We also pull down classes from that website. So, by all means, visit the website, and there's always someone monitoring your emails and your interest in our things that we have going on at the congregation. Once again, 404-286-5869. Good night.